everybody. Thank you very much. I am Derek Klimkowski. I'm the VP of Sales at Eyeota. Today, we are lucky enough to have Maikel O'Hanlon join us to discuss some of the challenges, some of the changes, some of the nuances that Maikel is seeing across Horizon Media with the clients and then internal communications. So I'll give opportunity to introduce Maikel and let him tell you a little bit about his day-to-day responsibilities, and then we'll jump right into some of the questions we've put together.
Sure thing. Thanks so much, Derek. Hi, everyone out there on the other end of camera land in strange times. Pleasure to be on, and thanks so much to Eyeota being a wonderful partner to Horizon on many levels. My name is Maikel O'Hanlon. I am an SVP of Performance Media and Innovation at Horizon. That means I sit within our Performance Media unit. It is a team comprised of the real-time bidding functions that are hands-on keyboard in terms of open auction universes, whether that be search, social buying, or programmatic, which is my primary remit. And there's certainly a ton of upheaval that we're dealing with at present, like everyone is, I'm sure, and it's made for an interesting way in which we approach assessing market opportunities and communicating those in a way that is considerate, thoughtful, tonally appropriate with so much of what our clients and sort of our fellow country people are going through.
Definitely. Well, Maikel, thank you very much. And, we'll jump into some questions here. We'll divide the conversation into two parts, kind of the internal agency communications that you're currently having and kind of how that dynamic has changed and shaping itself. And then the second piece is, some of the tips and maybe some of the communications that you're sharing with your clients. Obviously, we don't need to get into specific clients, but anything that you could share would be greatly valuable. So we'll kick it off here. First, we'll start with the internal side of the business. Obviously, Horizon is the largest independent agency in the world. You have teams scattered all over the place. You have different business units. What kind of initiatives and changes have you seen, with COVID-19 and everybody having to work from home and kind of changing what they know is normal?
Yeah, I'd say on a macro level, I've actually been really impressed with the way that our team members have banded together to be communicative, to be in touch, to be in it together in ways in which, hey, it's new, and yet sort of the over communication, the over participation in some levels, the eagerness to raise hands, to be available for projects, whatever those projects may be, and to be using mediums like Microsoft Teams or Slack as a way of staying in touch has been fantastic. I think I, like others, may have worried that when we dispersed to our various work from home settings, that it might have meant a bit of an out of sight, out of mind, hard to reach type of dynamic, and that the disconnect that comes from not seeing each other on a regular basis might lead to people sort of starting to lose the the inertia, the energy, the momentum to stay leaned in, and in fact it's been entirely the opposite, and that's been really comforting, really heartwarming for myself, for the clients that are at the receiving end of the work that our team members do, for the agency and for anybody that's trying to figure things out at present.
Great, and that leads me to a follow-up question. I think we all are dealing with change, right? And I think the stronger people rise to the top in the most challenging situations. And it seems like from the Horizon point of view, your team is stepping up in ways that you probably weren't sure about because you hadn't been in that environment before, and this is all new. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about, the communication from, kind of the leadership level and how it gets to your hands and how you bring that to your team. Are there certain initiatives that you're, kind of holding on to yourself and rolling those out? Maybe you could speak to the dynamic of your personal approach and then also, the Horizon leadership approach.
Sure. I think in helping to represent the resource that our practice should offer, certainly to the clients that we service, and then to the agency at large, and clients that exist within the agency that maybe we don't currently work on behalf of, but that we want to be great partners to. It was incredibly important that at the outset we simply make it known throughout the agency what type of resource we are relative to the types of insight and information that we can provide. So much so that one of our earliest communications was to say, hey, we don't have the immediate readouts on how the work from home quarantine situation has impacted consumer consumption just yet, but here are a bunch of hypotheses in terms of where it could go, right? With self-quarantining, with sort of mandated quarantining, the living room is going to become the center of the universe, and that could mean things like, the place whereby exercising routines are being performed, and that sort of exercise content is being searched for to stay fit and active. It could mean the place where cooking inspiration is sourced because there's going to be more cooking experimentation that happens. It's the place certainly where entertainment is going to be consumed. It's a place where gaming is going to be performed, and in laying out those types of sort of high-level hypotheses in terms of how the dynamic of the marketplace could change, we then sort of established a cadence where every week now we follow up with regularity in terms of what the week-over-week inventory scenarios are around sort of macro-level consumption habits with CTV and OTT, but then certainly on a sort of categorical basis, both serving the particular hypotheses that we suggested could become the new norm for consumer behavior, but also relative to the types of categories that our business verticals are relevant for in terms of where our clients signify. And it's been a ton of education, a ton of explaining things like DSPs and SSPs, and realizing that sort of like the parlance that we become comfortable with is still foreign to many people that are on the receiving end of really appreciating what things mean in terms of opportunities for where client investments could shift and may shift. And it's been neat to sort of get down and have both deep but sort of differing conversations on a client by client basis.
Got it. And as you mentioned, the client, and I hear you talking about, kind of weekly meetings to get a temperature check of the changes that potentially are happening, with media channels. Have you, and you spoke about a weekly meeting, I guess, going back to the internal side of things, how is that different than maybe the way you did it previously? Was it maybe more of a monthly meeting? Was it a quarterly meeting? Maybe you can kind of explain a little bit of the differences of today versus, let's call it, a month ago.
Sure. Yeah. So, I would say it's weekly communications that are effectively rolled up to communicate trends that we feel are substantial enough to represent, intel that is worth being shared out and potentially acted upon. But what's changed is that it is a effectively daily communication and meetings that are happening between ourselves and our respective sort of internal client team members that then represent the external client. And that has been, one of the most eye-opening sort of changes that this whole dynamic has brought, because you would think that intuitively, when we are all working in the same office, you would naturally have more opportunity to connect on a regular basis, as sort of frequent as daily, than you would when you are in different parts at home, right? But the need to understand how the situation that we're all at the receiving end of is leading to, daily disruptions in terms of media pauses or, creative refreshes or considerations for the way in which, a brand changes their messaging or thinks about new targeting audiences, means that we are on some level having, more sort of repeat conversations with higher frequency than we were previously, and that's both sort of exhausting at some point, but also sort of incredibly insightful and rewarding to be leaning into client challenges that we are being thoughtful to try and solve in ways that we actually never had to sort of dimensionalize before.
Yeah, well, I think those are some great points, and kind of leading that over and taking it into the client conversations. Is there something, a couple pieces or tips or things that have resonated over the last few weeks with your client engagements? Like, what type of questions are they asking you holistically? Maybe you could give us a little overview of that.
Yeah, sure. I think first and foremost, there is a desire to understand, if I previously thought that I knew my audience and where my audience was, so much so that, we were comfortable with our investments in live TV and live sports and sports sponsorships. And that has, all evaporated. And yet you're also telling me that the amount of OTT consumption, CTV consumption is spiking 20% week over week, which was, the figures that we saw the first week out. Most recently, it's still seen a 9% uptick in terms of total avails. Help me understand how I translate the previous sort of targeting parameters into the new consumption context, so that I can be sure that I'm still reaching the same audience that I wanted to reach in sort of the new forms in which they're consuming content, right? And so it's been a lot of work about equating the way in which they previously would define their target prospects, around sort of said target prospects shift into how they're taking advantage of their time within the living room being sort of the expanse of their universe at present. So that's one thing. Another thing that we're doing is sort of finding proactive ways whereby we can surface to clients considerations that they may not themselves even be catching, right? So because we sit in a place where the pixels that we place for retargeting purposes from a programmatic media standpoint allow us to see the pixel fire reports that indicate how much site traffic certain clients are seeing as part of an uptick in terms of client relevance for where clients are turning for entertainment or information or whatever the case may be. We are playing that back for client consideration in terms of does this increase in terms of activity on your O&O properties lead you to think differently about the way in which you might want to be active at present, right? And those are sort of spawning really really meaningful combos at present as well.
Got it. And you've mentioned CTV, out of home, in just different channels that you're starting and you're noticing some of the shifts. Are there some other channels that you're noticing pullback? Maybe you can just speak to kind of overall consumption and where the conversations are moving into certain channels.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of pub direct dialogue at the moment in regards to publisher volume of activity that is being seen in the way in which everyone's being considerate about finding ways in which to show up against that activity, but to also be considerate and thoughtful. There are certainly reasons to be increasingly active in search when it comes to sort of brand and owned sort of defensible types of keywords and online inquiries that are being made. There naturally, as I sort of signaled earlier on, was a huge disruption to the sports and the live marketplace, and anything around gaming that is coming online, whereby a space in which we previously haven't had the ability to insert advertising is now, sort of making creative waves relative to the way in which that can be done, has led for sort of an accelerated exploration that previously, wasn't being paced as aggressively as it is now. So it's really sort of spanning the gamut, client by client, sort of instance by instance, challenge by challenge, inquiry by inquiry. There's a lot of sort of outmoded or antiquated perspective that we're dispelling when it comes to the programmatic market, and that's been wonderful. I think the mantra for Horizon overall is in this time, be the most helpful partner that we can be, don't worry at all about what we're selling or how we're trying to make money. It's the way in which we stand up as a partner in this moment to provide equity to our clients, equity that comes in the shape of goodwill and helpfulness that is going to end up sort of coming back to mean bigger upside when we're all out of this, and that's the mantra that we're living by and following.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. Do right by your customers. Obviously, some of these things are probably not all tied to revenue, but in this I guess environment that we're in, it's necessary to make these changes, and you need to be able to adapt. And there is one thing that you had shared earlier in the week is finding that fair balance of like being sensitive and not coming across opportunistic. And I think there's a fine line when it comes to education that, the education is for, the purpose of knowledge, not always, with an end game there. And I think the more you show that to your clients, the more they buy into the relationship and see what you're really about. So today, Maikel, I wanted to thank you very much. This was very educational. I think some of these points, are well received. There's some of the topics that are being, broadcast across, the agency client relationships. And I really think Horizon, has taken a forefront, and, we value the opportunity to work together. There's lots of change out there, and we're here to hopefully disseminate and share some of those changes from the agency side into the community, and also be a resource to help support some of your efforts. So we value as a partner. Thank you very much for your time today, and we'll be sure to follow up on these questions and see where we are a month from now and see if things have changed. So once again, Maikel, thank you very much. I'll give you an opportunity to say any final words if you'd like.
Yeah. I think we're all looking for great partners at this moment in time. When we were talking earlier this week to prep for this convo, I sort of shot off a pie in the sky ask about intel that can help us to get sort of smarter about vertical knowledge when it comes to the verticals that our clients exist in. Within the span of 2 hours, you turned around the Eyeota Ion vertical reports, which I geeked out on in terms of digging deep for an hour or so plus going through them, and that was incredibly meaningful, because I think so many times you do the top line dance, which is to say, hey, if I can help you in any way, let me know, right? And then that sort of like dissipates into the ether, and so much so that when you sort of like sign off with that type of pleasantry, normally I don't know that anything is expected. So for you to have followed up the way that you did with those reports, I would say anybody else out there that happens to tune into this, ask Derek and team for those, because they were fantastic and material that we've already circulated and I can see us using in many ways for a long time forward. So thanks again to Eyeota and yourself, Derek.
Great, Maikel. Thanks again for being such a great partner, and we'll be in touch soon.
Be well. Take care.